Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel with me, Shiva Wilson, and today I've got my dad on camera talking about cannabis legalisation in the UK. His name's Peter, that's Peter Wilson, and I'm going to give him a load of questions to give him a run for his money about what he thinks about cannabis legalisation in the UK. So we'll start off with a big elephant in the room, which is, have you ever tried cannabis?
Well, I'm very old, so when I was at university, it was fairly common, mid-70s. But I only tried cannabis once because I didn't smoke, and you sort of had to smoke it. And so it was a beach party, and I tried it, coughed my lungs up, and decided I didn't like it at all. Since then, no, because I sort of didn't like the idea of taking a drug that messes with your mind. Alcohol is my preferred drug, if you like, because I know what the side effects are, and I know what the dosage is. You know what you're taking, basically. So that's more or less.
So what was your experience of it? You coughed your lungs up. Did you get any of the high effects of it?
Not really. I don't think I took enough.
No.
It was just unpleasant. Smoking when you don't smoke it was just I just thought, why would anyone do this to themselves?
Okay, so talking about medical cannabis, so are you aware that medical cannabis has been legal in the UK since November 2018?
Yes, I am. I followed it quite reasonably closely. I'm also aware of the fact that it's extraordinarily difficult in the UK to get medical cannabis, no matter what. If it helps epilepsy, it might be with your child. It's still a massive, difficult thing to try and get hold of a doctor who will prescribe it, and then get hold of the stuff itself.
Yeah. And bit of a strange one, skunk. Did you know that a lot of medical cannabis can be classed as skunk, i.e. cannabis flower buds with high THC content, up to 30% THC?
I'm not sure what, in my day, if you like, percentage THC was in cannabis. I suspect it was probably around 5 or 6 or 7%, something like that. And for what I understand, is that making cannabis illegal is what caused the development of very powerful THC content cannabis, marijuana. Because if you're going to get done for purveying half a kilo of cannabis with a THC content of 5%, you're not going to get an increased penalty, jail time or whatever if you are doing the same thing for half a kilo of cannabis with THC content of 30%. So from what I understand, more powerful cannabis, more dangerous cannabis in terms of THC was developed by drug dealers because it makes financial sense. It's worth 5 or 10 times as much money for the same potential risk. So high potency in terms of THC cannabis was developed because of the war on drugs, which is a really, really stupid thing if you want to stop harm.
Yeah. So what do you think about the idea of further legalising cannabis for recreational use, like they've done in Uruguay, Malta, Canada, 24 US states, and more recently, South Africa and Germany?
It's the obvious, sensible thing to do. I mean, nowhere in the world has the war on drugs ever worked, period. It just puts the cost up. If you're a legislator like our rather foolish politicians on this subject, not to mention other stupid subjects as well, if you were being paid by the drug barons, this is exactly what you do, a war on drugs.
Yeah. Because
you cannot stop it. All you're doing is making it more expensive, and you're screwing up people's lives by making them criminals. So it makes total sense. I mean, it's very likely that your psychosis was triggered by cannabis use, by skunk use. And because I campaigned about mental health issues surrounding that, I got onto the BBC database as someone who could talk about cannabis. And so I get local radios around the country ringing me up. In Manchester, they might have a local story about someone getting psychotic due to cannabis use or whatever. And they look on the list, and I come up saying, okay, they'd phone me up and interview me, but they always assumed I'd be for strong legislation to make cannabis illegal. And that's not true. I think you should decriminalise because you can reduce harm. You can spend the money you saved on education and making sure that cannabis is what it states on the tin, what the strength is, what the quality is, and so on.
Yeah.
You're trying to reduce harm. Legislating to make it illegal is foolish and causes damage to people.
Okay, so would you try cannabis again if it was legal recreationally?
I'm not sure. I must say my preferred drug of choice.
You don't have to smoke it anymore. You can
Yes, I know.
an oil or an edible, or you can vaporize it in a special device.
Yes. I'm not sure, because again, it messes with your mind, and my mind is very precious to me. I have enough problems with with life as it is, let alone risking something. I might.
Yeah.
I might. We'll see.
Give it a shot. So what do you think the benefits of legalising cannabis would be if they did in the UK?
Reducing the harm caused by drug dealers and so on. It's not just cannabis. They call cannabis a gateway drug, but that's simplistic. I think all drugs should be decriminalised, period. It makes no sense. It's never made any sense. It's purely almost like a religious crusade, which started off in the South America, southern states of the USA, and people make a lot of money out of it, criminalising it, imprisoning people. And as I said before, if you were in the pay, if you're a politician in the pay of drug lords, you would want it to be illegal because they make more money that way, and damage more people's lives. Is where I'm coming from. Is you should decriminalise all drugs. You get the outcry of people going, "Oh, you're making it easier." You're not making it easier. You're just changing it from a criminal offence to, if you become addicted, if you are addicted to it, it's a health problem. It's not a criminal problem. And also, practically speaking, financially, I read somewhere that £25 billion a year is spent on policing drugs. Imagine if you spent a third of that on education and making drugs higher quality and so on, so you know what you're taking, the amount of harm you would reduce and the amount of money you'd free up to do other things, education and so on. I'm old enough to remember the outcry over needle exchanges in Glasgow, because Glasgow had a massive drugs problem, injectables, and people dying of overdoses and infections and AIDS and all the rest of it. Big outcry. Kind of needle exchange encouraging drug use eventually came in, and the harm was dramatically reduced. So it's really a stupid thing to have it criminalised.
So medical cannabis is available, but it's mainly on private. So it's there's only been a handful of NHS prescriptions. A handful. Yeah.
A handful.
A handful.
And what size dog are we talking about?
Yeah, about 5 whole flower prescriptions, they've said. So do you think that medical cannabis should be more widely available on the NHS?
Of course, if it's a medical issue, it should be decided by doctors, not by politicians, period. Like abortions in America, decided by doctors and their patients, not by politicians.
Okay. So there's a lot of stigma around cannabis and cannabis use, and it's often portrayed as some form of demon. It's been demonised in the press, especially in the Daily Mail. So what stigmas need to be tackled to make cannabis use less taboo?
Well, I think we should be demonising the Daily Mail for what they do.
Yeah.
It's not a newspaper, it's a comic. It's a political comic. It's to do with, of course you're going to demonise it if you want to make sure it stays legal. That's how it works. You tell lies about it and so on. And so it's an educational program, and to stop this escalation of, if you like, stories and tales and anecdotes about the harms caused by cannabis. Yeah, I mean, there are harms associated with cannabis, but for a 14-year-old child, it's easier to get cannabis than it is to get alcohol, because alcohol is regulated. So do the same.
Okay. So what do you think the people's main fears around using or legalising cannabis are?
I'm stoked up by the Daily Mail and others for all sorts of reasons. None of them rational. It's all to do with emotional manipulation and deliberately stigmatising and telling wild stories. If you go back to the 20s, 1920s, before the drug war in the UK, there were loads and loads of people living completely normal lives who did a lot of opium and heroin and so on. No harm. Maybe some of them became addicted, but that can be managed. So the difference now is you criminalise someone, they're in prison, that's not going to do them any good, is it? You can't cure addiction by imprisoning somebody.
No. So what about cannabis and psychosis? So evidence suggests that young males are vulnerable to developing psychosis if they use cannabis. However, there is evidence to show that legalising it doesn't increase psychosis rates. And in some places like Colorado, youth usage has actually dropped since recreational legalisation.
Well, what can I say? It's because in your case, almost certainly your psychosis is triggered by skunk use. Yeah, it does impose risks, but criminalising it didn't help you.
No.
So criminalising doesn't help anybody. It just makes it less difficult to manage, less difficult to educate people. I mean, we went into schools to try and educate about the dangers of psychosis from cannabis and so on, young people in particular. But it's sort of frowned on. You can't, because you're basically, you can't teach young people the risks very easily when it's all being demonised and illegal and so on. So you are, some people would say, you're encouraging use by talking about it. It's like there's the religious side, and particularly in places like America where they have very poor sex education. It's the same thing. Don't talk about sex because you'll encourage people to have it, whereas all the evidence suggests the opposite. In countries with very good sex education, you get fewer sexual diseases, you get fewer young pregnancies, young people understand the risks, they understand what it means, and they can deal with it. Because they've been educated, they know, whereas if it's all hidden and sort of almost making it, when you're 14 or 15 or 16, you tend to be rebellious, or it's cool because it's legal. Yeah, it's sort of like, hidden. So it doesn't work. It's never worked. It's not rational. It's irrational and stupid.
Yeah.
People are being damaged by this.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for coming on my show.
No worries, son.
Yeah. And remember, everyone, we are trying to legalise recreational cannabis in the UK. Good night.